I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of Old's Oscar Countdown. And Merry Christmas. Hope you had a great Christmas. We are back here in the new year, or almost new year, a couple of days, to talk about some Best Picture rankings. Yes, we're back at it. I talked about my Best Picture predictions, but that was all the way back at the beginning of October. At the beginning of January, I always like to do an updated rankings to talk about where we are in the race for the big category, Best Picture. We don't do that for any of the other categories, but I always like to check back in on Best Picture because that's always the first one that we do, and the race changes so much. So this is kind of my updated Best Picture rankings, and spoiler alert, some things have changed, so I'd love to talk about that and the reasonings for that change and what that can tell us about the upcoming Oscar nominations. But if you're new to the series, welcome. I've been doing this all the way since October in terms of years. This is on our 10th season now, so we've been predicting the Oscars and talking about all things awards for a long time now. We've been doing a very good job at it over the years. Lots of very accurate predictions and getting it right. And we do it because of these deep dives and these recent check-ins and these videos. But ultimately, these are my predictions, and they're here to help you with your own predictions. I'm not telling you this is what's going to happen. I'm telling you this is what I'm thinking is going to happen. Based on my analysis, I'll give you my reasonings and my thoughts. But ultimately, I'd love to hear your thoughts, your predictions. Please feel free to leave them down in the comments below. I always love to hear that. But without further ado, let's jump into things. Starting off with my first pick for Best Picture to get nominated, which is One Battle After Another. The clear frontrunner, I think, to get nominated, but also to win. This is a movie that hasn't stumbled at all. If anything, it's overperformed for my expectations, showing up at the most critic groups possible. You know, it just reminds me a lot of an Oppenheimer year and Everything Everywhere All at Once year, in that early on there's a clear frontrunner that's winning a lot of these clear critic prizes and just kind of overperforming at time and time again, and it's the clear frontrunner. Now, we've seen instances like La La Land or The Power of the Dog, which had similar trajectories, did really well early on, and then didn't go on to win Best Picture, and I think there was a little bit of blowback at them being kind of the clear frontrunner. That being said, there's also instances like in Oppenheimer where it's the clear frontrunner and no one really knocks it off its axis, and it may be something like that. Regardless, all those movies did get nominated for Best Picture, so this is kind of as much of a guarantee as you're going to get. One of the most critically acclaimed movies of the past decade, and continue to be supported by not only the industry showing up everywhere, but then also the critics. Then my second pick, I went with Hamnet, which is still a clear contender in my mind. That is still a possibility that it wins. I'm not ready to say that One Battle After Another is the guaranteed Oscar Best Picture winner, because Hamnet is a super well-liked movie, particularly amongst audiences and particularly amongst the industry. Now, there are some critics that have maybe been vocal against it, and it doesn't have as great at super high Metacritic or Rotten Tomatoes as something like a One Battle or a Sinners or a Marty Supreme. But when we look at the industry and we look at the key stats, it does overperform there. Started off with the win at TIFF for the People's Choice Award, which is a crucial award. 15 out of the last 16 TIFF People's Choice Award winners went on to get nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars. So a very high hit rate. If you win that award, you're very likely going to get nominated for Best Picture, including some, Best Picture winners like a Green Book or a Nomadland or a 12 Years a Slave. So there's a real kind of connection there. And then since TIFF, it went on to win essentially a bunch of other audience prizes at other festivals. It's been showing up at the key kind of other award shows, whether it be Critics' Choice or Golden Globes. It has widespread support, and that's going to, I think, get at least a couple of acting nominations, but it's also a period piece, so I can expect it to get in for something like a production design or a costume design, I'm also predicting. So widespread support, does have some critical appreciation, but more importantly, whether it be the industry kind of telltale signs that we've seen so far, or whether it be the kind of film festival appreciation and that group and that audience, which is very accurate at predicting what's going to get nominated for Best Picture, Hamnet fits that bill very clearly. So I think it is the more emotional movie and the more emotionally resonant movie over a movie like One Battle After Another for a lot of people, and that may be enough for it to get the win ultimately, but it's definitely going to get a nomination. And then my third pick, I went with Sinners, another movie I'm very confident in. I do think the kind of top three, these are the kind of main three movies that will get nominated, but also could potentially even win for Best Picture. Sinners is a movie that was released in April, and ever since April has persisted. So there's no kind of nervousness for me that, oh, maybe it's going to fall off, because it has continued to persist. What was, I think, very notable for me is that the critics have really appreciated this movie and supported this movie. I thought that maybe that would fall off a little bit, and it would just be seen kind of as a blockbuster and not a real contender. But the critics are really putting it up as a really important kind of piece of work. Ryan Coogler is a director who's been nominated before in this category, and this is a huge original hit that was celebrated by audiences and critics alike, and is right behind one battle after another in terms of its number of nominations at these award shows. Has been kind of still continue to show up, and I do think, mostly a blockbuster type of a film, but we'll have some acting support there for Michael B. Jordan on the acting side of things, so has that widespread support. And I mentioned this idea of widespread support because at the Best Picture category, every single branch votes on it. So, for example, the best, editing category, only the editing branch of the Academy, only the editors vote on who gets nominated. So you have to kind of get into the mindset of, okay, what do the editors think is the best edited movie of the year? Not for Best Picture. For Best Picture, it's what does everyone think is the best movie of the year? So if you think that Sinners is going to get a bunch of technical nominations, but then also acting nominations, then you go, okay, well, the actors branch likes the performances of the movie enough to nominate it for, let's say, Michael B. Jordan, and then the production designers and everyone else on the below the line likes the movie enough from a technical craft. So then you have a bunch of people in this branch liking it and a bunch of people in this branch liking it. You'll have that overall support for a nomination. That's why I mentioned things like overall support, and Sinners definitely has that. Then my fourth pick, I went with Frankenstein, and this is a huge riser for me. Didn't have it in my initial predictions, mostly because I wasn't sure which Netflix movie was going to rise to the top, and Frankenstein is the clear one here. Like Sinners, has a potential acting nomination and then a bunch of technical appreciation, and that will definitely help support the film. I think it will follow a similar path to Guillermo del Toro's last movie, which did get nominated for Best Picture, Nightmare Alley, and did so not on the back of acting support, but on the back of production design and editing, sound editing, or sound support, and that kind of a path, cinematography, things like that, the technical elements of a film rather than the kind of above the line writing, acting type. And Frankenstein, ever since premiering at the fall film festivals, has just kind of continued to grow in esteem. It started off kind of bumpy, but then showed up at second place at TIFF. We mentioned with Hamnet, TIFF People's Choice Award is very important, so while it didn't win, it came in second place, so a strong fan support from that audience group that's so predictive of the Oscars. Then it came out to the public, and the public really liked it, and then it overperformed at Critics' Choice nominations, and then it overperformed at the Golden Globes, getting it for Oscar Isaac and Guillermo del Toro. And every year we see a kind of technical type of a movie get nominated at Best Picture, even if Jacob Elordi doesn't get in. We've seen movies like All Quiet on the Western Front or Dune Part 2 that have limited acting support but have a lot of the technical side of things, a lot of the technical support. So they'll get a lot of appreciation for production design and visual effects and things like that, and still get in for Best Picture because they have enough fans from those branches of the Academy. Frankenstein, I think, has that, and then I also think has appreciation for the Elordi performance too, which should push it over the edge, and why I feel comfortable having it in here for my number 4th slot. Then with my 5th pick, I went with Sentimental Value, and this is a movie I've always been confident in, included in my Best Picture rankings and considerations ever since its premiere at Cannes, and where Frankenstein was a technical a movie that's going to be, I think, really well liked by those branches within the Academy. Sentimental Value is an above-the-line movie. This is going to be supported and nominated by people who appreciate the acting and the writing. So this is a movie that I think is going to get 4 acting nominations. The last movie to get 4 acting nominations and not get in for Best Picture was Doubt in 2008. And that was, when the Best Picture category was still only 5 nominees. Now we have a guaranteed 10 total nominees. I think Doubt probably would have gotten in an expanded 10 lineup. And it's pretty rare that you have a bunch of acting nominations and then not get in for Best Picture, because we know the actors branch of the Academy is the largest branch. So if you like it enough to get 4 acting nominations and you like that ensemble enough, it should have enough widespread support from the actors to get in. I also expect it to also get in for something like writing, and the writers will really appreciate this film as well. And then you think about the content of the film. It's so perfectly suited for the Academy, about a filmmaker and about being an artist. And then also the content itself, where you have, American notable actors like an Elle Fanning or someone like a Stellan Skarsgård, who's been in a lot of Hollywood American films that will, I think, appeal to the more American members of the Academy. But as we know, the Academy has become increasingly international over the past 10 or so years. So we've seen that international films will start to do well a lot better than in the past at the Oscars. So this is also ultimately an international film, mostly in Norwegian with Norwegian actors like Renate Reinsve or Inge Isdal Lilius. So we have that connection there. It feels European, it feels American. It's this kind of good blend, this good combination, and we'll have the support of the actors and has been pretty much showing up everywhere it needs to be. So I expect it to get 4 acting nominations and screenplay, and then maybe director, and then pretty comfortably here for picture as well. Then in my 6th spot, I went with Marty Supreme. And this is the other big riser aside from Frankenstein in my predictions. Now I had it in my original predictions of my 10, but I had it in at number 9 just because I hadn't seen the film and I wasn't sure if this was going to be a type of a movie that is well celebrated. Ultimately it was. I have seen the film, and while I don't think it's a slam dunk to even compete for Best Picture, I'm not as bullish as other people. It has been absolutely celebrated by the critics. Has a 91, I think, right now on Metacritic, which is very high, very well appreciated by critics, which we know in the past has been very helpful at getting nominations for the Oscars. I think Chalamet is a lock of a nomination, but I do have some concerns. I thought it was going to get nominated for Best Supporting Actress. It did not. At one point, I thought it was going to get in for score. I no longer believe that after its kind of misses in certain key categories. Same thing with, you could even say something like costume design. I don't know if it's necessarily going to get in for there, especially when it missed the Costume Designers Guild. So there's some concerns that I think this is going to maybe have less nominations than I initially thought. That being said, it's got a dynamite performance from Chalamet, who is an actor that when he's in a movie, it gets nominated for Best Picture. I mean, that's the status he's in. In the last, 6 or 7 years, he's had 5 Best Picture nominations. So he is an actor that shows up in a lot of Best Picture type movies, and this is his movie this year, and this is the one he's promoting, and he's fantastic in it, and I do think he's going to get nominated. So it's still a period piece too, so I think it will get some below the line elements of editing, maybe cinematography, production design, but then also has the Best Picture and then Best Actor, maybe even potentially Best Director kind of combination there. Also a late breaking movie, so I'll have top of mind awareness. Even though I have it in my 6th spot here, it's kind of in this neither fish nor fowl, where I don't think it's going to potentially win Best Picture, but it will still probably get in for a nomination. And then my 7th pick, I went with It Was Just an Accident, which is a movie that's had a bit of a roller coaster up and down over the past few weeks here. But I included it in my initial predictions, and I'm still continuing to include it here, if only because there's one stat that it has that's not going to change, which is that 4 out of the last 5 Palme d'Or winners went on to get nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars. This was this year's Palme d'Or winner. I've seen the film ever since I saw it at TIFF. I found it to be very engaging, but also very mainstream, easy to like. This isn't an artsy European movie that maybe members of the Academy won't universally like. I do think that this is a movie that will appeal to, of course, international voters. It winning at Cannes, it already has appealed to international voters, but then also I think more American voters as well. We've seen it show up on some critics' prizes at the top. It didn't have maybe as much of a celebration from the public and the fanfare. I think most of these have had kind of an odd rollout and weird release, but the people who have seen it have celebrated it, and I want to over-index in international films. We know the Academy has become more international, and I think this is going to follow a similar path to a movie like A Drive My Car, where it gets in for director, screenplay, and then picture. Or, and maybe a better example would be something like another Palme d'Or winner in A Triangle of Sadness. Get in for director, get in for screenplay, get in for international film, and then get in for picture. That's the kind of path I see for It Was Just an Accident, and I think it will follow that path pretty easily. I am somewhat confident that this is still going to get nominated, and I, frankly, at this point, would be surprised if it doesn't get nominated for Best Picture. Then my 8th pick, I went with The Secret Agent, which a lot of the same things I said for It Was Just an Accident can be applied here. I want to over-index on international films. It won't have as easy of a path. It won't get as many nominations as a movie like Sinners, so that's why it's kind of here at the bottom of the list. I was a little bit concerned at the beginning of the season that I wasn't going to get nominated. Unlike something like It Was Just an Accident, which I think is a little bit more mainstream. Secret Agent is a little bit more slower. It's a little bit more of a hangout movie. It's not, I think, as going to be widely celebrated. But I was wrong in the sense that the American critics really have put their arms around this movie and really appreciated it. So I think the fact that the American critics have really appreciated this, I think we can make that connection there for the American members of the Academy will still engage with this. It's not an international only kind of a film. And I think we'll follow maybe a similar path to something like I'm Still Here, another Brazilian film, kind of a sister film in many ways to this movie, about the topic that it's about and how it's about it, and having a great lead performance at its center. So we know that there's some appreciation for this type of storytelling, as we saw just last year for I'm Still Here. But then I think this is even more critically well-acclaimed movie and has even more of a guaranteed acting nomination. And showing up at the Oscar shortlist for something like casting is a really good sign of just general overall support for the film. So I'm going to be looking at the Actors Awards. I think if Wagner Moura gets nominated there, that will show a strong sign of American acting support and make me very confident that we'll get included in here. But right now, even still, I want to over-index in international films, and I think The Secret Agent has been appreciated enough by, we know, the international community, but then also to see so many American critics really include it in their top 10 of the year lists made me go, wow, okay, so maybe this will be a movie that transcends both all kind of regions and appeals to the Academy at large. And then with my 9th pick, I went with Wicked for Good. And this is a fun one. This is a movie that I've seen people completely remove from their Best Picture lineup. And even myself, when the reviews came out to the second one, I did panic a little bit, and I've still dropped it quite a number of places here. But I still wanted to include it in my Best Picture predictions because I think a lot of people are maybe not being honest with themselves and honest with the amount of number of nominations that this film is likely to get. And that ultimately was the big reason why I ultimately included it in my Best Picture lineup. Because, and I encourage you to do this as well, look at the other categories. Try not to look at individual categories as a whole. Because sometimes you just go, okay, I'll check this box off, I'll check this box off. And then you look at your overall predictions, and then you go, oh wait, am I really going to predict one battle after another for 16? It's going to break the record for most amount of nominations? Probably not. It's probably going to miss a couple. So let me cross this or that out. Sometimes it's helpful to look at your overall predictions. And I did that for Wicked for Good. And I went and I tallied it up and I go, I think it's probably going to get a guaranteed, not guaranteed, but very likely 5 nominations, maybe even 6 nominations. So then the question I asked myself was, okay, if I'm predicting it to get 6 nominations and not for Best Picture, why would I do that? Why would it get nominated and be celebrated by a bunch of other branches and then not get in for picture? And then you look at the Oscar shortlist, and it showed up 8 times in 7 different categories. And then that indicates to us that there's just general widespread support for the film. And then you think about the first movie, and you go, well, actually, it was not even a critic's movie in the first place. That movie only has like a low 70s on Metacritic. This has a high 50s on Metacritic. So the difference isn't that crazy. This was always a franchise that was first and foremost appreciated by the industry. It will have a lot of technical appreciation, which I still think will happen. I still think Ariana Grande is probably going to get nominated for Best Supporting Actress. That will help the movie in terms of appreciation for her performance. And then when we look at movies that had a bunch of nominations that didn't get in for Best Picture, the most recent example I think would be something like Carol in 2015, which got 6 nominations and then didn't get in for Best Picture. But if you remember in 2015, that was still the year where they had up to 10 nominations for Best Picture, but not totally 10. And that year there were only 8 nominations. So I think it's safe to say that in an expanded 10 lineup for the Oscars that year, that Carol probably would have gotten in with the other 6 nominations that it got. Just to say that it's very rare for a movie to get a bunch of other nominations and appreciation in a bunch of other categories and then not get in for Best Picture. So I looked at my predictions overall. I saw acting support with Ariana. I saw a bunch of technical support. I saw 5 or 6 nominations, maybe even more. And I went, we have the appreciation and support from the shortlists. We have the appreciation and support and likelihood of the other categories. Why wouldn't that translate, therefore, to Best Picture? Now, it may be like the Globes, where the Globes gave it a bunch of nominations, but didn't give it in for Best Picture because they said, we like the parts of it, we don't like the whole of it. That's a possibility. But the Oscars haven't necessarily done that historically. If they like the parts, they usually like the whole too. And an expanded lineup of 10, Wicked for Good, I still think, is in the 10. And then with my 10th pick, I went with Train Dreams. And this is a movie that's been pretty universally acclaimed ever since premiering at Sundance. Every festival it's gone to, it's been well appreciated amongst critics, amongst the general audience. I do think that this is a movie that is well celebrated, emotionally impactful for them. It's kind of maybe the small movie that could. Usually most years we do see at least one Sundance movie get nominated, whether it be Call Me By Your Name or Minari or so many other great examples. So Train Dreams could follow in that kind of a format. I was looking at some of the other nominees that I am predicting it in. I think it's going to get in for original song. I think it's going to get in for screenplay. I think it's going to get in for cinematography. So you have some widespread support already there. What's actually going to be notable for me, and if I'll ultimately include it within my final predictions, will be the Actors Awards. The Actors Awards, formerly the SAG Awards, have loved Netflix movies in the past. They nominated Adam Sandler for Hustle and things like that. So they like Netflix movies. And this is a Netflix movie. So if someone like a Joel Edgerton shows up for Best Actor, or even something like a Felicity Jones for Best Supporting Actress, that will give me the confidence that it's a really well-liked movie amongst actors. Even if I don't predict Joel Edgerton or Felicity Jones get nominated at the Oscars, it will show that there's, at least from the SAG and the kind of American branch of the Academy and the Actors branch, there's a general appreciation for their performances enough to get acting support. And then we know it has some of the technical support, because I do think it's going to get it in for something like cinematography. And I just like the fact that it's premiered at Sundance, well appreciated, very universal acclaim, is that kind of small Sundance indie that could. And I do think kind of maybe slits into this final spot from Netflix, who knows how to campaign, who is starting to increasingly campaign for the film, pushing his resources away from something like a Jay Kelly, which I think has just been disappointing ever since. And then you think about the Oscar shortlist, it still got in where it needed to. The Golden Globes, it overperformed with the Joel Edgerton nomination and a picture just a Joel Edgerton nomination, or even I would say an overperformance with the song. Critics' Choice, it definitely overperformed when it got in for Best Picture. And then these shortlists I mentioned didn't overperform, but got in everywhere it needed to. Got in for score, got in for cinematography, so it made in the important parts. And then some possible contenders. My first one being Sirāt. I think this would be a more unconventional kind of a path, but a path that maybe we shouldn't ignore. What's really lingering in my head and why I'm considering it, maybe putting it in, is because it got in as a shortlist for Best Casting. Why did it get in for Best Casting? And then, all the other, below the line categories that I got as well. And we know that I think it's going to get in for something like score. So if it gets in for something like score and sound and international film, well, that's 3 other nominations. That's some, broad support. It's not traditional in the sense of I don't think it's going to get in for screenplay. I don't think it's going to get an acting nomination. But maybe it's the international branch of the Academy really is starting to be super prominent and it gets in. But ultimately what I decided to do was, you have Sentimental Value in there. You have The Secret Agent in there. You have, It Was Just an Accident there. Are they going to go 4 out of the 10 international films and go with Sirāt? Maybe we're not there at the Academy just yet. Still, the Academy, for the most part, the majority is, American voters. Well, they like this movie. Who knows? Hard to say, especially without that acting support. That is pretty critical. Without that writing support, we don't see that too often. But it is a movie that's been building in terms of its momentum, and it has that craft. We know it has that craft and that international support, and that may be enough. And then my other possible contender, I had No Other Choice, which is similar to Sirāt, where it's an international film. Will they really like it? Those questions still arise for me. But then the question then becomes, well, why hasn't Park Chan-wook been super celebrated as a director? Why maybe he didn't get in for something like the Golden Globes when there was a possibility to get nominated for him there? And then you think about something like just the movie in general. Why is Sirāt getting in for something like cinematography, but then No Other Choice doesn't make the shortlist for cinematography? What's the more liked international film at this point? That's a question. Lee Byung-hun, if he maybe shows up at the SAG's Actors Awards, maybe that would be enough for me to put it in for a nomination. But right now, it just doesn't seem, whether it be super celebration by the industry or super celebration by the critics, it's like well-liked, like a movie like maybe Begonia, well-liked, but maybe not beloved, and maybe doesn't have that intense, passionate fan base to ultimately kind of push over the edge and give it a nomination. And then the fact of Park Chan-wook's other films haven't resonated either, and even something like Decision to Leave didn't get in for international feature, so there may be just an allergy to his films in general. There's a little bit of cautiousness that I'm having, but it absolutely is a contender, well-liked, celebrated international film, released late, legendary director, all that good stuff. But that's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you comment below. Let me know your updated Best Picture rankings. I'd love to hear that. And subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the videos. We're almost near the end of doing these individual videos. I'm going to be talking about visual effects and editing and international feature. That's all going to be coming up soon. So I hope you enjoy that. And stick around and check out some of the other videos that I've done on some of the smaller categories like score or production design. That's always cool to see too. But that's about it. Until next time. Stay tuned.